Slow. They're easy to use with any liquid for all kinds of situations.
As you can see there, it's pouring right into the can. There's nothing spilling, no waste. It's not going anywhere on the employee.
Goat throat pumps work with solvents and acids, caustics and oils, pesticides, and even with water.
Been here 14 years, and that's the best thing we've had.
Good safety practices can be almost overwhelming when you think of everything that has to happen when you're running a land care business. When you're loading and mixing plant protection products, safety can be simple, and there are so many benefits to you, the other employees, and the bottom line. And you can get it done without losing your shirt. Whether you run a golf course, a land care, or a landscape business, this training is perfect for people who want to use just the right amount and stop wasting land care chemicals. This training is perfect if you want to stop spilling chemicals and cleaning up. When it comes to solving the problems created by liquid handling, prevention beats cleanup by a wide margin. Wouldn't it be great if you could stop worrying about safety compliance and the ever-changing regulations and label requirements? And perhaps you even want to know about HACCP compliance. I bet you didn't know that a 30-gallon container is the same weight as a linebacker and probably equally hard to handle. And I bet you didn't know that a 2.5-gallon container is the same as half of a battery. Why is this important? Because it's very difficult to control the chemical volume coming out of these containers so that you get exactly what you want and no more. It's also really hard to prevent spills. To pour from a 2.5-gallon container, you need to turn it on its side. Then you need to make sure that there is no glugging or splashing causing a chemical spill. Are you aware that nearly 80% of emergency room visits from exposure to concentrated chemicals occur at the loading and mixing station? We want to help you stop these types of exposures. What is a sealed system transfer and how does it help you? Hopefully, you will leave this short session ready to improve safety when loading and mixing concentrated chemicals. I've been the chief equipment designer and engineer for goat throat pumps since 2000. I've engineered industrial systems for such companies as Tesla, SpaceX, Whirlpool, and the U.S. Navy. Starting in 2009, I worked with California regulators and growers to develop our closed transfer system when there was no viable commercial systems on the market. I continue to stay at the forefront of the regulations to make sure that our equipment meets the highest standards to meet compliance regulations. I'm also on the ISO Standards Committee setting agriculture standards for the world. Our equipment is made in New England, and we are proud to be a U.S.-based company with 20 years under our belts. And guess what? Reducing exposure to concentrate increases efficiency. Precise, accurate measuring increases efficiency. Employees work a lot harder when they feel safe, and that increases efficiency. And all of these things improve the bottom line. If you make training simple, people will adopt it. If you make the operation simple, people will do it. If you minimize exposure, people will want to do it. If it saves money, management will pay for it. And we all know that management support is key. I know you don't want to hurt yourself or the environment from exposure to the concentrates, and you certainly want to be more efficient. The direct and indirect costs of a pesticide spill or injury can be substantial, not the least of which is the loss of wasted chemical. Pesticides, particularly some of the newer concentrated formulas, are very expensive. So spilling a few ounces could cost several $100s in lost product during a single transfer. Safety when loading and mixing chemicals can be very simple. That's why we're tackling the biggest issue that has tripped up growers, so you can skip the trial and error part. If you eliminate exposure, not only is your operation more efficient, your people will be happy to follow the new methods. So let's talk about sealed and closed systems. A sealed system transfers liquid from the original source container into measuring, if desired, and then into your mix tank with little or no user exposure. The closed mixing system is equipment that protects you from the dangerous liquids in an efficient and safe way with no exposure. These liquids can get onto your skin or in your eyes and cause unintended damage. As previously mentioned, the pesticide label will tell you if a liquid is dangerous enough to require a closed system. Both systems take the liquid out of the container for you and prevent material from touching your skin. Some systems may also rinse the empty container and any hoses for you. So let's take a look at a couple of these transfer systems and how they are used by some of our existing customers. Goat throat pumps are called a probe extraction system, and it removes the liquids from the container while the container remains in the upright position. Michael Sear, owner of Advanced Lawn, and his crew make over 1,800 monthly applications on residential and business sites in Connecticut. His crews use a lot of liquid materials. While growing his business to its current size, he found that he had to make choices about the size of the container in which to purchase the fluids. Various trade-offs had to be considered. The 2.5-gallon containers are quite convenient for pouring, but if purchased all at once, they were hard to store. And he didn't like throwing that much plastic into the landfill. He also found that buying 22 2.5-gallon containers of any fluid was nearly 4 to 6 times the cost of a single 55-gallon drum. He began buying the larger 55-gallon and 30-gallon barrels. The methods of transferring the fluids, siphon, rotary, pull action, lever action, were all initially very effective, but over time the pumps failed frequently, and these failures produced leaks and spills. Wanting to improve worker safety, Michael had heard about goat throat pumps from his local land care supplier. He purchased one. Living up to its claim, the pump worked perfectly when inserted atop the upright drum. He says, "The pumps have turned out to be a safe and smart solution for us. It works like a beer tap for liquid materials. There's no pulsing, and at 4 gallons a minute, there is plenty of volume for our purposes. Our space-restricted fluids room is much cleaner, and we are no longer throwing pumps into the landfill." In some cases, a closed transfer system is needed to meet regulations. Lime sulfur is a controlled substance, and for many years, California DPR required a closed transfer system. When our systems came on the market, the Holman Ranch, a Carmel Valley vineyard, required a system for 2.5-gallon containers. Several years later, when I visited Juan, the farm manager, I found he was still using his equipment. But closed transfer systems were no longer required for this liquid. When I asked him why he was using it, he told me that the equipment made it so easy to be safe that his people were no longer afraid to use the chemical to do the job. Mike Higuera, manager of the Ranch Golf Course in San Jose, suffered spills, employee injuries, leaks, and loss of product. The initial issue was that the 55-gallon drums of liquids were stored horizontally in a dedicated chemical shed with spigots mounted on the fronts. Positioning the full drums was both difficult and dangerous. Then, because they projected into the room, the spigots were often subjected to accidental contact, sometimes becoming completely dislodged. Mike Higuera said, "I read an article about goat throat pumps, and I had tapped a few kegs in my youth, so I was very familiar with the technology. I added it to the budget and bought my first one. That was some 6 years ago, and not only have the pumps turned out great, I've also added some options that make life at the course even easier. One is a remote tap that comes at the end of a flexible tube, so we can set the receptacle on the floor to fill it. The other option was to use an adapter with an air regulator on top. We hook the pump up directly to our compressor so we don't have to hand pump. The bottom line is that the pumps have saved us time, injuries, and product. They paid for themselves very quickly. If you could meet the safety requirements and the regulations in a simple and efficient manner, would that reduce some of the stress at your job? If you provide safer working conditions, your employers are going to work harder because they know that they will go home safe. If it saves money, management will buy into it. If you invest in the right safety equipment now, you will enjoy the benefits for years. Do you think you and your management might want to use a piece of equipment which generally pays for itself in less than a year? If you do, think about giving us a call. Thank you for your time today. My team and I look forward to answering any of your questions.